Okay, so there's our first paragraph. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger follows 3 days in the life of Holden Caulfield, a depressed teenager who wanders around New York City after flunking out of his Pennsylvania boarding school in 1949. Alienated and alone, Holden struggles to find a safe place to go as he grieves the death of his brother and laments the inevitable loss of childhood innocence. Maybe we could even add Allie there. At 16, Holden stands at the threshold of adulthood, but resists growing up, placing this text at odds with the typical coming-of-age novel, known as a Bildungsroman. These novels concentrate on the development or education of a central character. Traditionally, this growth occurs according to a pattern. The sensitive, intelligent protagonist leaves home, undergoes stages of conflict and growth, is tested by crises and love affairs, then finally finds the best place to use his or her unique talents. Although Holden leaves home, experiences conflict and crisis, and has love affairs, he matches none of the other characteristics of a typical Bildungsroman protagonist, most notably growth. Therefore, The Catcher in the Rye is not a Bildungsroman. And now I'm ready for my first body paragraph, and I've already written my topic sentence. Unlike a typical sensitive Bildungsroman protagonist, Holden repeatedly demonstrates his insensitivity. And notice that in each of these topic sentences, it does get a little repetitive, but in each topic sentence, I made sure to mention the word Bildungsroman, right? So that the reader, as he or she moves through my essay, never has a moment where they're confused about what my main thesis was. The main point here, the reason that I want to talk about Holden's sensitivity, Holden's intelligence, Holden's growth, Holden's talent. The only reason those things are interesting is because they're here listed in the definition of Bildungsroman. That's why we're bothering to talk about them. So you need to kind of keep reminding your reader of that as you move through the essay so they don't lose the thread of your overarching thesis topic. All right, so kind of have these all lined up and we're ready to go search for quotes. And that's how we kind of get started here. I'm going to skip past what you would typically do in your body paragraphs and talk about the conclusion paragraph for a moment. In a typical conclusion paragraph, we want to do two things. First, we want to restate the thesis in different words. And second, we want to give the reader a sense of closure, often by doing what's called answering the so what question. And what I mean by this is we've read, your reader has read your essay by this point. Presumably, you've included enough evidence and you've made your argument convincingly and cohesively enough that the reader is convinced. So when you restate your thesis, the reader's like, yep, you're right, I agree. We don't need to rehash all aspects of the body paragraphs at this point. That's kind of treating your reader like an idiot. They read it, they have followed along. Just restate the overarching idea. So in this case, our overarching idea is, in spite of the fact that the novel follows a teen on the verge of adulthood, it is not a Bildungsroman, right? That's my restatement of thesis. So, boom, step one done. Let's look at step two. Now I want to answer the so what question. So why is this topic interesting or important to a typical reader? And ways to kind of think about how something could be important is, what can we learn about the teenage years or about the genre of Bildungsroman? What can we learn about what perhaps Salinger had in mind, or about the limitations of this genre by writing? So one thing that I think about is that quote that Salinger put at the beginning of the novel, the allusion to David Copperfield, where he said, this isn't that David Copperfield kind of crap. Now, you do not ever have to put a quote in your conclusion sentence, in conclusion paragraph. You don't have to, but it can be useful. So in this case, this seems awfully relevant. Salinger even points out in the first sentence of the novel that this isn't that David Copperfield kind of crap, seemingly intentionally distancing this text from the genre, while at the same time reminding the reader of it. Okay, that's an interesting thing that Salinger did, to bring up the genre and then dismiss it. Salinger's maneuver suggests that a refusal to accept the loss of childhood innocence results in stagnation, in being stuck painfully in the world of childhood forever, or worse, in a limbo between childhood and adulthood. While his novel celebrates Holden's eye for authenticity and beauty, it also implicitly warns the reader about the alienation and misery that one must face if one refuses to grow up. Okay, so I started with my restatement of thesis. In spite of the fact that the novel follows a teen on the verge of adulthood, it is not a Bildungsroman. I don't have to go through the list again. The reader got it. Now I need to say why. Why that's interesting, why that's important, how it helps us understand the novel better, the genre better, the teenage years better, Holden Caulfield better, the reaction to this book better, something about how we can expand this to think more broadly about the book. So Salinger even points out in the first sentence of the novel that this isn't that David Copperfield kind of crap, seemingly intentionally distancing this text from the genre, while at the same time reminding the reader of it. Salinger's maneuver suggests that a refusal to accept the loss of childhood innocence results in stagnation, in being stuck painfully in the world of childhood forever, or worse, in a limbo between childhood and adulthood. While his novel celebrates Holden's eye for authenticity and beauty, it also implicitly warns the reader about the alienation and misery that one must face if one refuses to grow up. So we kind of got to a larger theme and a larger idea that's interesting about the book. Okay, so that would be kind of what we want to shoot for in a conclusion paragraph. Restatement of thesis and answer the so what question. Now, all we need to do is go locate our quotes, okay? And let's just walk through how you would go about arranging your first body paragraph. So unlike a typical sensitive Bildungsroman protagonist, Holden repeatedly demonstrates his insensitivity. My next step in this paragraph is to lead into the quote. So this would be like by saying something like, for example, Holden does something at such and such scene in the novel, and then we'll incorporate the quote. And then we'll make sure to point to how this quote shows insensitivity. Then we're going to transition smoothly to the next lead-in to the next quote. We're going to give our quote, point to how this quote shows insensitivity, transition smoothly to the next lead-in to the next quote, point to how this quote shows insensitivity, and then wrap up the paragraph by reminding the reader that this all relates to the definition. Okay, so got our topic sentence. Unlike a typical sensitive Bildungsroman protagonist, Holden repeatedly demonstrates his insensitivity. Then I'm going to say, all right, for example, Holden does blah, blah, blah. That shows that insensitivity. We want to vary our sentence structure, vary our language. This would be a great moment to get out the thesaurus and look up some synonyms for insensitivity so we're not saying the same thing over and over again. then I'm going to transition, then lead to the next quote. And remember that if you look at pages 44 through 46 in the Style, Voice, and Mechanics Guide, you can see some examples of how to smoothly integrate quotations so that perhaps you can use really short quotations peppered into your sentence structure, and you don't have to lead into the quote, give the quote, analyze the quote, lead into the quote, give the quote, analyze the quote, but rather you can be gently incorporating little bits of quote into your analysis sentences. So you're kind of doing all of that somewhat simultaneously rather than really belaboring the point. And remember that if you're going to bring up an instance in the text, a quote, a moment, you need to let the reader know, where is this? When is it? Who is saying it? Don't just drop in pronouns without antecedents. Don't just drop in actions in the text without setting them up for us first. It's confusing to the reader. Remember that your essay needs to guide the reader by the hand, take them through from topic to topic using smooth transition language. So one last pass through, you can see everything we've accomplished so far. Obviously, you're going to eventually have a title here. That needs to be a descriptive title that's centered. In this case, I am arguing that this novel is not a Bildungsroman, so I'm going to say Salinger's novel fails to meet the definition of Bildungsroman. Little dry, little wordy. I could probably come up with a better one if I thought about it more. But the main thing you can see with this particular title is that at least it gives very precisely what I will prove. It's not cutesy, it's not vague. The reader can just read the title and know what my essay will prove. And then I've got my intro paragraph and on down the rest of the essay, which I'll fill in later. So I hope that helps.